Good afternoon, everyone. I hope this video finds each of you well, family, friends, etc. Um, I sent out a email to everyone earlier today with a copy of the study guide for next week's exam, as well as the PowerPoint that will accompany these videos. This will be the last set of videos for the cognition unit. It'll focus on information processing theory, transfer of knowledge, metacognition, problem solving, critical thinking, that stuff. I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to deliver the exam next week, so stay tuned. I'll communicate that with you here in the next couple days. I'll also be making a video probably tomorrow that will work on the practice case study. Trying to think if there's anything else. As always, you can always get a hold of me and ask me any questions that you need as it relates to the class study guide, etc. What I'd like to do is I'd like to make these videos a little bit more interactive, even though we are apart, but try to make the material a little bit more engaging. So what I want you to do is to have a pen and paper or pencil and paper along with you as we go through this video. So the first thing what I'd like to do is I'm going to read to you a passage, and when I read the passage, all you need to do is to sit there and listen. And then I'm going to read a series of statements, and I'm going to ask you as to whether or not you believe them to be true or false or a question mark if you don't have enough information. So let's first things first. Let me read the passage, and then we'll go from there. So John had a busy day at the office. As he was driving home late that night, he stopped at a neighborhood convenience store to pick up a pack of cigarettes. After completing his errand, John stayed on for a few minutes to talk with the pretty store clerk. A heavy-set man entered the store and, brusquely pushing John aside, walked up to the counter. He handed the clerk a large canvas bag and insisted that the contents of the cash register be placed into it. The clerk reluctantly obeyed his order. The man then sped away with the filled bag under his arm, leaving the clerk in tears, the empty cash register drawer still open, and John looking on helplessly. So, now I'm going to read a series of statements, and what I want you to do is write down a T if you believe the statement to be true, a F if you believe the statement to be false, or a question mark if you don't believe you have enough information. All right, so, number one, John had worked hard at the office that day. Number two, on his way home from the office, John stopped at a convenience store. Number three, John stopped at the store at noontime. Number four, John was a smoker. Number five, John purchased a pack of cigarettes. Number six, John made a date with the store clerk. Number seven, the store clerk was male. Number eight, a heavy-set man entered the store. Number nine, the heavy-set man brought a large canvas bag into the store. Number 10, the heavy-set man brusquely pushed John aside. Number 11, although the cash register originally contained money, the story does not say how much. Number 12, the heavy-set man left the store with the bag under his arm. And lastly, number 13, a crime was committed at the convenience store. So let's see how you did. All right. Number one, John had worked hard at the office that day. That was question mark. John had had a busy day at the office. We don't know if he worked hard. Number two, on his way home from the office, John stopped at a convenience store. That is question mark. Why? Well, we know that he was driving home late that night, but we don't know if he's coming from the office or not. Number three, John stopped at the store at noontime. That is false. He was driving at night. Number four, John was a smoker. That is a question mark. Why? He's picking up cigarettes, but we don't know if they're for him or not. Well, we don't know whether he smokes or not. Number 5, John purchased a pack of cigarettes. That is a question mark. It says after completing his errand, but we don't know if his errand was actually picking up cigarettes or not. Number 6, I'm sorry. John made a date with the store clerk. That would be false or question mark. There's no evidence there to support that. Number 7, the store clerk was male. That is question mark. It says he stayed on to talk with the pretty store clerk, but it never says whether the clerk is male or female. Number 8, a heavyset man entered the store. That is true. A heavyset man did enter the store. Number 9, the heavyset man brought a large canvas bag into the store. That is question mark. We know that he handed a large canvas bag. We don't know if he brought it into the store or if it was already there. Number 10, the heavyset man brusquely pushed John aside. That is true. Number 12, although the cash register originally contained money, the story does not say how much. That is question mark. They never say what is actually in the cash register, so we don't know what's actually whether it has money or not. Number 12, the heavyset man left the store with the bag under his arm. That is question mark. He sped away with the bag under his arm. We don't know if he left the store with the bag under his arm. And lastly, number 13, a crime was committed at the convenience store. That is question mark. Okay? So, what have we learned through that passage and series of statements that we read? One of the things I think we learned is, boy, we make a lot of assumptions, right? What are those assumptions based upon? Prior knowledge, previous experiences, right? So when you listen to the story, listen to the passage that I read, there's a lot of inferences that we make based upon what our previous experiences have been. Going into a convenience store, running an errand, what the store clerk looks like, all of that stuff. So what happens is based on our experiences, whether we've been into a convenience store, we've read a story about this, we've watched a movie about this, etc., etc. The truth is, we know what's happening, right? The guy's coming back from work, stopping off and pick up some cigarettes, talking with a pretty lady, going to make possibly see if he can have a date. Who knows what's going to happen? Big guy comes in, pushes him aside, says, "Give me all your money," grabs the money, puts it in a bag, speeds away, and everyone's freaking out because they were just robbed. That is the natural inclination that, having read that passage, what we hear, what we see, etc., right? Think about what we've talked about with Piaget and schema theory and stuff like that. We have a schema for this. We've seen this. Maybe not firsthand, but we've seen it in a movie, we've read it in a story, we've heard about it. We have a schema, and it's there. It's that snapshot that we rely on when we're doing that. The truth is, I didn't say some of that stuff, but you inferred that. Why? Because that was connected to what our previous experiences have been. When we talk about information processing theory, remember when we talked about behaviorist ideas, behaviorist principles, that was strictly more environmentally based. When we talked about social cognitive theory, we were talking about things that were both behavioral based as well as kind of internalizing or mental processing and modeling aspects. Now, when we talk about information processing theory, here we are concerned with the internal processing of information. More specifically, information processing theory is a theory that considers how people think about or mentally process information. Okay, what are they doing with this information? How are they thinking about this information? All right. So, as we talk about information processing theory, we have to first acknowledge that there are some certain assumptions that are different than previous assumptions that we used in social cognitive theory or behaviorist ideas or Piaget or Vygotsky or any of that stuff, right? The first assumption, and if you follow along with the PowerPoint, you'll see this as well. The first assumption is that we as teachers influence the cognitive process. Okay. Now remember, as a teacher, we're oftentimes concerned about what we're going to teach, but we have to think about not just what we teach, but how we teach. one of the complaints that you'll hear from students a lot is that it's not just the content of what the teacher is talking about, but it's how they do it. If you have someone there who is monotone, Bueller, Bueller, anyone, blah 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 blah. They talk like that. Oh my goodness, just put us to sleep, right? We just fall asleep at that type of instruction. The idea is it's not just what we teach, but how we teach. We influence the cognitive processes. What do I mean by cognitive processes? Cognitive is just code for thinking. We influence the process of how you think, what you think, why you think that way, etc. So keep that in mind. As a teacher, we recognize that learning is an internal process, according to an information processing approach. Learning is an internal process. That means I don't know what's going on in your head. When I look to my students and they're smiling at me, I think, oh, wow, they're fully engaged. But for all I know, you could be thinking about, okay, man, tonight I'm going out with a friend. We're going to go do this. And you're smiling for whatever reason, right? So the idea is I don't know, looking at just at your face alone or your actions, whether or not you're really processing that information in a meaningful way. Third, we can draw inferences about cognitive processes by observing student behavior, though. We look to student behavior to kind of give us the clues as to whether or not they're getting something. So when they give you that kind of that look like they're lost or they're not understanding something or they're getting bored or rolling the eyes, whatever else, we can engage their level of engage, or we can understand their level of engagement sometimes by their behavior. We can also understand a little bit about how they might process something. Think about this, for example. I'm going to give you a list of words, and I want you to recall the list. Okay, here's the list. Doctor, carnation, fork, rose, spoon, patient, tulip, knife, nurse. Now, if you were to try to generate that list right now, go ahead and try. Pause it. See how many you can remember. What you might observe is a lot of people try to regurgitate that list, try to give it to me just exactly as they said it. Some people, though, might say, oh, yeah, I see it. I know the list. I'm like, oh, really? Tell it to me. And they say doctor, nurse, patient, rose, tulip, carnation, knife, fork, spoon. They saw the categories. They saw the groups that those words kind of are tied to. So in some respects, they were able to, thinking down, were able to see a bigger picture, which enabled them to get the whole list of words. Much easier. But if you don't see the groups within that list, trying to just remember the list verbatim can be very difficult. We also have to think about active involvement in one's own learning. Teachers need to make sure that the students are actively engaged in their learning. If they're not paying attention to the information, very difficult to remember to process the stuff, right? So when the students aren't actively engaged, aren't actively involved, difficult to process information. We also have to think about another assumption is selectivity about what is learned. Think about while you're sitting right now in whatever environment you are, I imagine there's lots of things going on. Perhaps there's cars driving by, people in the background, TV, radio, people in the kitchen. Who knows what could be going on? But many of you don't even really hear the noises, don't hear the coughs, don't hear the noises because you're focused on the video and you put all that stuff to the background. Why? Because it's not helpful to you while you're learning now. We can only pay attention to so much information at a time, so we have to be selective. Lastly is people impose personal meanings all the time in their processing of information. Imagine this sentence. Rocky slowly got up from his mat, planning his escape. The lock that held him was strong, but he knew he could break it. What do you envision as I said that sentence? As I said the sentence, what do you envision? I'll talk about it more in the next video.